on Kowloon side, Nathan Road heading towards Tsim Sha Tsui is busy. On Hong Kong Island, Gloucester Road eastbound is congested, and the New Territory's Kwai Fung roundabout is busy.
Good evening, welcome to the wedding.
A Chinese medicine dealer was found hacked to death in his flat in Weston today. The victim, Chung Hon Hua, was found with multiple chop wounds to the head and body. The attack was described by the detective in charge as the most vicious he had seen in recent years. He'd so many chop wounds to the head it was difficult to identify him, he said. Detectives believe the motive for the attack was associated with the victim's business activities. About 700,000 Hong Kong dollars worth of musk, reportedly smuggled in from China, was taken from the premises by the killers.
Not opium or heroin, ivory or diamonds, but musk. Few people know what it is. Most have never heard of it. Yet for some, it's big business. Hong Kong, that leftover but thriving outpost of empire, which today looks out to the new Pacific and over its shoulder to China. Here you can still buy or sell just about anything, including musk, a substance that looks like damp coffee grounds and smells like old farmyards. It has always been, and still is, a great deal more valuable than gold. My name is Richard Taylor. I got interested in the subject of musk through my long-standing fascination with smells, and consequently with perfumery. You see, I was intrigued by how the creative people in this business, the noses as they're called, talked about musk with such reverence and awe.
Natural musk has a special note which is unique, and if we would lose it tomorrow, we would lose a note which is very interesting, which has many qualities with its warmth, which is mystery of smell.
It gives a better, I don't know how to put it in English, when following a woman in the street or a girl in the street, a perfume which has musk, you feel more. It has an exalting power.
Natural musk comes from one source only, a very primitive deer that has no horns, but in the case of the male, a pair of long canine teeth. They're an unusual feature of this rare and now threatened animal, much valued as jewelry by the mountain people in those regions where the deer is found. This is the Himalayas, and those mountain ranges to the north in Russia and China. Here, this shy creature seeks places that are precipitous, inaccessible, high up, where the forest finishes and the alpine pastures begin. They're such solitary animals that musk deer are seldom seen together, except in the mating season, and so elusive that we still don't know much about them. What we do is often based more on fantasy than fact. My first sight of a musk deer was this venerable old stuffed one in London's Natural History Museum. It was presented to the museum by the British Pharmaceutical Society, who for over 100 years, I'm told, had it displayed in the window of their headquarters in Bloomsbury Square. That's an interesting connection because traditionally, in the Orient, musk was used more in medicine than in perfumery. It's a tradition that goes back at least 5,000 years, and it still continues in Tibet, in India, in China, throughout the Orient. The musk itself, which comes only from the male of the species, is found in a little golf ball-sized sac or pod situated under the skin just in front of the sexual organ. Funky and urinous smelling, it's been historically the musk deer's death warrant. The 13th century explorer Marco Polo used it extensively during his travels in Central Asia and China. Along with gold, he found it an easily transportable means of barter. Sometimes, he said, that journeying through musk deer country, the air was so full of its scent that it made his men quite faint. But then, there's never been a shortage of extravagant stories about musk. In the town of Tabriz in Persia, when they built the Mosque of Zobedeh, they put musk in the mortar. In spite of that being in the 12th century, they say it still smells of musk today. It's a bit like Madame de Pompadour's bedroom, 20 years after her death, apparently, it was heavy with the fragrance of the musk she'd used. In 19th century Paris, an English traveller reports that courtesans carried small sachets of musk nestled between their breasts. I confess I'm at a loss, he says, to know whether it is to conceal or enhance the body's natural odour. Today, particularly in the United States, musk's reputation as an aphrodisiac has been turned to good account. Cycling to work in downtown New York is 74-year-old Hank Walter, until last year the chairman of one of the biggest multinationals in the perfume business. His company is what's known as a perfume supply house. Discreetly behind the scenes, these companies make nearly all the famous name perfumes, from Estée Lauder to Yves Saint Laurent. To do this, international flavors and fragrances, like its competitors, depends increasingly on substitutes, or synthetics as they're called in the trade. Musk is no exception. There are over 300 different musk synthetics. Prominent amongst these is IFF's Galaxolide. Ironically, Galaxolide came into its own in the 60s, when the flower children were all into natural smells. Walter.
At that time, down in the East Village, the outer part of Greenwich Village, there was a small pharmacy called Kiehl's Pharmacy. And they began to offer Kiehl's Natural Musk. And it was a sensation. Every young person wanted Kiehl's Natural Musk. Now, what was amusing was that we noticed that our sales of our synthetic Galaxolide were just going up and up to a company I'll call X. And we finally asked X whom they were selling to Kiehl's.
Out of the Greenwich Village experience, companies erupted with a rash of musk-named aftershaves and perfumes. All, without exception, used synthetics. Leader in the field was Jovan, a young and audacious company with the approach of the patent medicine seller. It's not what you put in the bottle, it's what you wrap around it.
Went down and turned around and gave me a wink. Said I'm gonna make it up right here in the sink. It smelled like turpentine and looked like Indian ink. I held my nose, I closed my eyes, I took a drink. I didn't know if it was day or night. I started kissing everything inside. But when I kissed the car down and fed it for the ride,
the Chicago-based company has been a phenomenal success. President Dick Mayer explains how.
There were some that accused us of selling sex at the time, and I think I can still remember saying that we don't sell sex, we would rather give it away. But in a way, that's what we were doing in terms of advertising. We put the pack up front with the bottle beside it and said, and it's legal. And created the idea that there was something unusual about this fragrance and its properties. It was being long talked about as having aphrodisiac qualities. And we had a little tongue-in-cheek approach to our advertising.
I'm convinced that every woman out there can be sexy. All you need is a little help. A little here. A little here. A little there. A little there. And maybe a few other places.
Jovan Musk. We help American women stay sexy.
A full frontal approach that I don't suppose would have much appeal to the House of Guerlain. With its headquarters on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, the company Guerlain has the reputation of being très snob, the epitome of discretion and good taste.
Comme ça, mais...
This is the house that created Shalimar and Matsuko and Le Bleu, some of the immortal classics of French perfumery. It's perfumes like these, not those that flash the word musk in their name, that contain, in fact, the real musk. In other words, musk that comes from the musk deer. This real musk does three crucial things for a perfume, which has nothing to do with its smell. It makes it last longer, that's to say, extends it. It causes it to radiate off the skin, and it helps to blend it. In other words, to bring together all the different notes and create a satisfying, harmonious chord.
It's very feminine spray.
I hope to talk about this with one of the Guerlain family, Monsieur Jean-Paul, the present nose of the company. Although he gets most of his musk through a French importer, it's also his custom to visit Nepal in the Himalayas to check his purchases at source. Unfortunately, when he heard I wanted to talk to him about musk, he abruptly cancelled our interview. Strange, because at his factory we saw they use sizable quantities of the stuff. Such reticence naturally provokes questions. You see, the musk trade is now a murky area. Much of it's illegal. That's because in 1973 in Washington, an international wildlife agreement was signed. It was called the CITES Agreement, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. One of those endangered species was the musk deer. Although accurate information was scant, at that time it was difficult to even find a photograph of the animal. All the evidence showed that since the turn of the century, their number had declined dramatically. Currently, the legislation is this. 6 countries, namely India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Burma and Afghanistan, have agreed not to sell musk so as to protect their musk deer. There is, though, one exception. If the potential purchaser of the musk can get hold of this, an export certificate from the country of origin which says the musk was obtained without harming the animal. Not easy, since traditionally you kill the deer to get the musk. Other countries where musk deer are found are not prescribed in this way. And as we'll see later, this has provided a cover for a large, lucrative and illicit trade. So, starting in the street markets of the old part of India's capital, New Delhi, I went to find out not just how this trade flourishes, but why. Why this shy, delicate animal was surrounded by such mystique and legend, and what it produced credited with such potency. Getting the answers to that was to be as elusive as the musk deer itself.
नहीं मस्क का जो रियल मस्क होती है जैसे जो हिरन वगैरह में से निकलती है रियल मस्क का ट्रेड बैन है अब डियर को मारा नहीं जा सकता इसलिए उसका कोई चीज़ बनता नहीं है नहीं वो मारा तो नहीं जा सकता दैट इज डिफरेंट पर आप रखते तो होंगे ना मस्क वैसे काम में तो बहुत आती है नहीं अब वो बैन हो गया है और नहीं ये जो मस्क आपने दिखाई हाँ ये कैसी मस्क है ये सिंथेटिक है अब आप ये देखिए गुलाब है ये फूलों से बनता है दिस इज रियल.
So if in India musk is no longer being used in perfume, as it's claimed, what about its other traditional use, in medicine? In the Indian subcontinent, 2 schools of medicine have a tradition of using musk. Hindu Ayurvedic medicine and Muslim Unani medicine. Muhammad Hamid Ali is a Hakim, a Unani doctor. Like other practitioners of what we in the West know as alternative or complementary medicine, he considers his patient's total condition, physical and psychological. His approach is more intuitive than analytical. He takes time. Here he is preparing a rich and very tasty tonic for weakness and palpitation of the heart. For this, he said, he used to use musk, but the change in the law and its cost have put a stop to that. There's one area, though, where the lack of musk is most acutely felt. Its reputed efficacy as a sex tonic. Although from this roadside sign, one wonders what sex problems could possibly be troubling this couple, the pharmacist here has a special musk-based medicine that traditionally has covered a wide spectrum of associated complaints. Of course, he may still supply his special customers with a little musk on the side. But at a large, reputable company like Hamdard, famous throughout the Islamic world for its energizing tonics, they say they're forced to find substitutes. And it's not quite the same thing, according to their chief pharmacist, Dr. A.M. Israeli.
Personally, I feel that musk is a good aphrodisiac, stimulant,
for nervous system and the sex apparatus.
Hamdard also produces booklets to go with their medicines, concerned as they are not to neglect the psychological side.
He is assured that there is no defect, bodily defect or organic disease in him. It can be cured readily. He prescribes medicine, 2 types of medicine. For example, he prescribes medicine as Hamdogen-like medicine, which is sex stimulant, and he feels that something has gone in his body, energized his body. The other thing is, there must be some local massage or local application which can stimulate the male organ also. For that purpose, we have got, for example, Tila Mushkwala, which stimulates the male organ, and it becomes possible for a person to indulge in sexual act or sexual activity.
Which goes a long way, perhaps, to explain why musk has always been more valuable than gold. However, though valued, nobody, it seemed, in India was now using it. Or if they were, they certainly weren't telling me. But in Nepal's capital, Kathmandu, I did find a medicine that claimed to contain real natural musk. Was this so? I asked the director of the factory that makes it, Dr. Ram Prasad Mishra.
Very good question. Really, Taylor, you asked the question which I have eager to reply you. I was really eager to reply you. We are facing very big crisis these days. Not now, for last 5 years, you believe me, we did not get a single gram of this musk here in our pharmacy. This is old stuff which we have, we are using now.
So even when the medicine makers are using it, it all comes, apparently, from leftover stock. The laws in Nepal and India protecting the musk deer and controlling the use of musk are much less strictly applied further east, in Japan, which extraordinarily uses 80% of the world's supply. It was here in medieval times that samurai warriors would carry around small leather pouches of musk. They'd eat it before going into battle to give themselves strength and stamina. In the 17th century, a learned monk evolved a musk tonic for children to cure colic and general irritability. For 300 years, its formula hasn't changed. It contains, along with musk, ginseng, gallstone, and deer horn. Uzukyomegan has become, like our rosehip syrup and cod liver oil, a childhood institution. Everyone here has grown up with it. Perhaps that's why, in spite of the tightening legislation on the use of musk in Japan, this children's tonic is exempted. Tokyo journalist Fuyuko Nishisato, talking with the manager of the firm that makes it, wondered whether using musk was really necessary. Mr. Hirose.
うずき梅がんにはね、4種類のですね、動物性生薬と4種類の植物性生薬が入っていますけどね、じゃこれが一番ね、大事な商品です。原料でございます。
代替品というのは発見することが可能なんでしょうか。麝香に関しましてはね、麝香の代替品と麝香を配合した中の麝香の代替品というのをね、2種類で考えてますけどね、まあ各皆さん今まだ考えてますけどね、まだその結論が出ておりません。
There is one area where Japan's recent prohibitions on the use of musk are beginning to bite. Sensitive to the criticism of conservationists, Japan is now taking musk out of sex, or at least trying to. When it comes to the sex industry, high class or tacky, Tokyo is a city second to none. From sophisticated geisha houses to hole-in-the-corner peep shows, it's well versed in the art of erotic release for the tight-buttoned, high-pressured businessman. And yes, it's musk that makes its modest contribution to keeping the wheels of love and fleeting romance and plain old lust turning. Here in Shinjuku, one of Tokyo's famous entertainment districts, the chemist shops stay open all night to sell so-called stamina drinks. aphrodisiac being, under Japan's strict advertising laws, a taboo word. Stand and watch at any corner. Happy hour and a good meal behind them. They come, pay their money, and there and then fortify themselves for the long night ahead. Reveller and hard-working hostess alike. From children's tonic to stamina drink may seem a big leap, but ironically, the formula is much the same. Ginseng, deerhorn, musk and all. And in the high-tech fantasy land of Japan's famous love hotels, there'll also be musk stamina drinks. These hotels, by the way, are not just for the casual encounter or the illicit affair. In Japan's congested cities, young couples come here to escape parents, and careworn parents come to escape their kids, just for a while. It's a society that, like other parts of Asia, has always had a more accepting attitude to bodily pleasures, so that musk was seen traditionally as the subtle rejuvenator that, used with discretion, had no deleterious effect, an invigorating tonic rather than a dangerous drug. How justified, though, is this claim? Well, back in India, New Delhi's School of Medical Science, they're trying to find out. Edinburgh-trained Dr. S.D. Seth, working under laboratory conditions, is testing a whole range of Indian traditional medicines. With musk, he first examined its effect on the heart and circulatory system.
You see, in this experiment, we are demonstrating the effect of musk on the isolated heart of rabbit. What we have done is that we have taken out the heart from a rabbit and we are maintaining it on a salt solution which has been provided with oxygen as well. Now we'll see what is the effect of musk on the heart. When we inject the musk into the heart, the force of contraction of the heart increases. But the interesting thing is that it does not increase the heart rate with which it is beating.
How this affects sexual lassitude, I don't know. Not negligibly, I imagine. But for Dr. Seth, it has wider implications.
In the case where the other drugs have failed, musk can be used to stimulate a failing heart.
Rats were used in another experiment of significance to arthritis sufferers. This was to test the traditional claim that musk can counteract inflammation or swelling of the joints. And there seems to be something to it.
Now here we have the animal which we used as control, and here we have animals treated with phenylbutazone, which is a standard anti-inflammatory drug, and here we have the animals pre-treated with musk.
What they found was that both phenylbutazone and musk were effective in inhibiting inflammation. How then did musk compare with the more established medicine?
It was found to be more effective than phenylbutazone. Now, phenylbutazone has the disadvantage that it produces peptic ulcer or ulcer in the stomach. And in those terms, we will say musk is a better agent to control inflammation of the joint than phenylbutazone. The limiting factor is the cost factor.
What diseases are we talking about?
It may be rheumatoid arthritis or rheumatic arthritis. Now, these are the disorders of the joint from inside, not from outside.
On the face of it, there does seem to be a case for saying musk is a useful commodity. But how far are we prepared to go to get it? Tom Milliken lives in Tokyo and works for the World Wildlife Fund. I asked his view as a conservationist.
Well, if the trade in musk can be placed on a sustainable utilization basis, we have no difficulty in accepting this kind of trade for any species, really. The problem is that the Himalayan musk deer, and this is the region which supplies most of the musk coming into Japan, it has been documented that populations are crashing, and they're crashing as a result of the illegal trade.
Well, can we use musk on a sustainable utilization basis? That's to say, not destroy the goose that lays the golden egg. For more than a century now, that certainly hasn't happened in the Himalayas, which is why hunting is totally banned by all countries in this region. Nowadays, the only people who are allowed to shoot musk deer here are scientists like Michael Green, and that's just with tranquilizer guns. Cambridge-based ecologist Michael Green is here on a research project supported by the Indian state of Uttar Pradesh and the World Wildlife Fund. His subject is musk deer. With some local assistance and his wife Mary, he lived for 3 years, 10,000 feet up, at the limit of the tree line in total and splendid isolation.
How's the Premier Canal? Did you get March's weather records?
Out of this has now come what is probably the most detailed study of musk deer ever undertaken.
Right.
Its purpose was not just to know more about the deer, but to examine the possibility of hunting or even farming this animal on a sustainable basis. India, to its great credit, has taken its commitment to animal conservation very seriously, and certainly more than most countries. Penalties for poaching are heavy. Smuggling musk out of India can now incur a 5-year prison sentence.
Of course, because the animal lives within very precipitous, inaccessible habitat, protecting the species is extremely difficult in practice. And for example, in this area of the Garhwal Himalaya, we now have a situation where about 30 guards are supposed to patrol an area of 3,000 square kilometers, and all this is mountainous terrain.
Michael Green is one of the quietest, most self-effacing of men, and up here in the solitude of the Himalayas, he seemed in his element. Indeed, with that rather startled look of his, and his agility on the mountain slopes, one visitor remarked that he seemed a bit like a musk deer himself. How elusive musk deer are became apparent when Michael Green described attempts to capture some animals in order to fit them with radio collars.
Here you can see that we've constructed a barricade with some of the natural vegetation in order to set a trap for the musk deer, which is positioned between 2 latrine sites, and so this is the only means of access for the animal. And the idea is that there are 2 sliding gates which fall down as the animal moves through and touches the tripwire. Unfortunately, we haven't yet been able to catch a musk deer by this means.
Of course, the most expert in the hunting of musk deer are the locals. But providing they can get away with it, they do have the advantage of not having to take the animal alive.
My personal view is that often the hunters do have a very good knowledge of the animal's habits, just through their own experience. The job of the ecologist is to come along and to scientifically document all that perhaps the layman already knows. And so really you could say that the scientist is putting into jargon what the average hunter will have already learnt through his own experience.
Different areas have different methods: snaring, hunting with dogs, shooting, or poisoned spears staked in the ground. For a subsistence farmer living up in the remote Himalayan foothills, the temptations are great. Consider the economics. His cash income each year will be about £80. By killing just 1 male musk deer, not just the middleman he sells it to, but he himself will make £100. By the time this musk pod reaches the international market, it will have tripled in value. Now, If we were poor hill farmers and some remote city bureaucrat told us we mustn't hunt an animal that our forefathers had hunted for generations, would we take any notice, I wonder? Well, maybe we would if we were offered an alternative. And that alternative, some say, is musk farming. At Kufri, near Shimla, the Indians have established an experimental musk deer enclosure. They've got about a dozen animals. They've even managed to breed some in captivity. Not easily, though. Such a wild, excitable creature doesn't take kindly to being caged. Some of their difficulties are described by Forestry Officer M.S. Jain.
Well, it's also a solitary animal like the big cats, particularly like tiger, you know, where they mark out their territory in the wild. And only in the breeding season, say in December, January, you find them in pairs. But otherwise, they stay lonely. And so far as managing them, I think it requires quite a big area so that each male can carve out its territory. Otherwise, if the two males fight, you know, they'll kill each other.
Breeding in captivity and domesticating the musk deer only makes economic sense if something else is achieved. That is, the harvesting of musk from the animal without killing it. Musk, that intensely pungent, coffee grain-like substance, is produced only by the male animal and only in quantity during the breeding season.
If we, through our research here in this small farm, can establish the fact that one animal can yield, say, 10 times in its lifetime or 12 times in its lifetime, and convince the people that you don't have to kill the animal. So far as the methods, how it can be done, whether tranquilizing is good or physical restraint is good, is also not yet established.
The Indians are not alone. Here at the Central Zoo in Kathmandu, the Nepalese are about to carry out an extraction. They've learnt their techniques from the pioneers of musk farming, the Chinese. The Chinese started back in 1958. For some time they kept very quiet about it, but in recent years they've published their findings and invited delegations to see what they've done. One delegation member was Dr. Mukti Shrestha, director of the Kathmandu Zoo. In China's Sichuan province, he studied, amongst other things, the technique of musk extraction. The sac containing the musk is lubricated, then a special silver spoon is inserted, and very gently, the moist granules of musk are scooped out. Doing it this way without a tranquilizer brought home to me how unsatisfactory this was. It's a creature as nervous and as highly strung as any thoroughbred racehorse. It's easily terrified, no matter how carefully it's handled. To judge from magazines like China Reconstructs, China's musk farms seem quite splendid places, models of their type. Naturally, I thought there'd be no difficulty in getting permission to film there. However, when I applied, I got a dusty answer. You see, Mr. Taylor, the polite and smiling attaché at the Chinese embassy in London, explained, our musk farms are what you might call our secret weapon. Well, why, I wondered, were Nepalese and Japanese delegations invited, not just to get some superficial film coverage, but to actually study their methods of operation? I was to discover only later there were very good reasons for not allowing in a television crew with their often irritating questions. It was less to do with industrial espionage than the way the musk farms were run. Talking with those who had visited them, the farms, it seemed, were often rather wretched places, manned by local villagers more adept at hunting than husbandry. Breeding had proved difficult, the farms had to be constantly restocked with animals from the wild, and the musk produced was of poor quality, a fact not unrelated perhaps to the musk-producing males being kept in cages not much bigger than themselves. Even Dr. Shrestha, about to return to China, had his reservations.
So they keep just the male ones. So they keep in the crates, wooden crates.
How does the animal get exercise?
Well, they won't get the exercise, just like the poultry keeping inside the battery system. And they are satisfied with this thing.
There were other reasons, though, why the Chinese were reluctant to let us see their musk farms at first hand. Reasons related to the fact that today the musk trade operates in two ways, legally and illegally. What's happening is that the small amount of legal musk has become a convenient cover for the much larger quantities of illegal musk reaching the market. Perhaps, though, we should pause at this point and ask, does this really matter? Musk, after all, isn't heroin. Well, the problem of musk is, of course, not what it's used for, but where it comes from, a rare and now endangered animal, rather than a too-easy-to-grow poppy.
I'm not going to...
What musk and heroin do have in common is their expensiveness, which means they are both smuggled and they both get adulterated or extended, as they say in the trade.
I have another musk, which is exhausted musk. It's real musk too, but it has been in alcohol for 1 year.
In the case of Paris dealer Jean-Pierre Petitdidier, there is no pretense. He supplements his fresh musk with old exhausted musk. But is this the usual way of producing a cheaper musk for a customer?
It is the usual way, my end of the business or my competitor's end of the business here. Because we have this exhausted musk, we can have this exhausted musk at our disposal, but it's not the way at the origin in the Himalayan mountains we discussed before. Because they don't use this, they use various things like blood, animal blood, exhausted tea leaves, exhausted ground coffee, sometimes even urine to give it some smell, because the other products don't. But adding this to the musk doesn't adulterate it at all, because it is pure musk, except that it has no smell left.
And do your customers always know about that?
They do. They do because I tell them. If they tell me I cannot pay this price, give me pure musk at a lower price, I tell them I can give you musk, not pure at a lower price, but I tell you what I'm doing. There is no secret in this trade.
No secrets, perhaps. But for a lot of people, when it comes to the buying of musk, a certain, shall we say, sleight of hand.
Et mon rendez-vous de cet après-midi est bien maintenu à 15 heures.
End users these days are expected not to ask too many questions, simply to get their paperwork right.
Which means, as far as musk is concerned, that we cannot import it unless we get an export permit from the country of origin. And with this paper only, we can import the musk freely in France. It is called the CITES permit. CITES meaning, I've got it here, Convention on International Trade on Endangered Species of Fauna and Flora.
Contrary to the intention of these certificates, musk still comes out of all the traditional musk-producing countries, even the 6 Himalayan countries where there's a total ban. Sometimes this is directly. More likely, though, it's from that place which, ironically, has never seen a wild musk deer in all the years of its existence. We're now back in the British territory of Hong Kong, where they buy, sell, and launder musk in vast quantities. In an apartment visited by strangely disappearing men, I got my first lead as to how this is done. It was in the Chu Chau district, a place you don't go unless you've got business. It served as both office and store for a Chinese wholesaler. Behind secure doors, Mr. Ho, which isn't his real name, dealt in all sorts of expensive medical products, from ginseng to deer pistol to musk, especially musk. Providing we didn't show his face, he agreed to talk with our contact in Hong Kong, Miss Wong Cho Yi.
如果有雜質呢度睇唔睇到嘅咧？
因為有雜質咧，就可能嗰啲好雜質咧，就黐喺個手盲裏邊嘅。
Mr. Ho told us he got all his musk from China. Was this from China's musk farms, we asked? Of course not, he said. I only buy my musk in pod form, not as loose grains. And you only get the pod if the animal's been killed. Anyhow, he added, I'm told the musk they extract on those farms doesn't have any potency, either for medicines or for perfumes. It was an opinion confirmed by another Hong Kong dealer, a man who proved to be as open and as candid as Mr. Ho had been discreet. Mr. Shaman Lal Gupta, originally from New Delhi, is a trader proud of giving value for money.
And
surrounded by musk pods, he remembers the old days.
Many people in this trade were calling me King of Musk because I always thought to serve the people by genuine quality and not by cheating.
Yes. Unfortunately for Mr. Gupta, a few years ago in 1980, a customer in Paris to whom he'd sent a consignment of musk sent it back again, claiming it had been adulterated. It precipitated a court case, the outcome of which was so controversial that it led to the revised laws we have on musk today.
One, my parcel was returned from France, which was seized by the fishery department at the customs. Then they also seized my stock from my office.
Mr. Gupta was charged with dealing in a prohibited commodity. His Indian solicitor's advice was straightforward. Plead guilty. You haven't got a hope. But Mr. Gupta, aware that he was now in Hong Kong, not New Delhi, got himself one of the territory's most eminent Chinese barristers, who more than compensated Mr. Gupta for the £14,000 he was charged in legal fees. What happened was this. His counsel pointed out that according to the conservation law that existed at that time, remember this was 1980, banned musk came only from a particular species of musk deer, the Himalayan species, then referred to as the Moschus musciferus. Holding up one of the confiscated pods in court, he demanded that the prosecution prove that this particular pod came from the Moschus musciferus, rather than one of the other species. In some embarrassment, they admitted they couldn't, because with our still limited knowledge of musk deer, not to mention certain arguments over their classification, nobody could.
So the case was dismissed and goods were released to me. You see, I was doing business quite openly, and there was anything what I was hiding.
That's why today the CITES agreement forbids trading in all musk, regardless of the species that it comes from, if it originates in the Himalayas, which is where Mr. Gupta's came from. So where, I asked Mr. Gupta and his son Sudhir, did they get their musk nowadays?
If you want to buy musk today, any quantity you can buy from the market.
And where is this musk primarily coming from?
Nowadays, China.
There are a number of ways in which musk comes in from China. One is by boat. Up in the New Territories, that part of Hong Kong which borders China, is Laofaoshan. It's a small fishing village where they don't exactly welcome strangers, especially with cameras. Apart from fishing, the other thriving activity here is smuggling. A short haul from the jetty just across the water is China, a great hinterland hungry for what Hong Kong has to offer. From Sony Walkmans and Leica cameras to cheaper local goods like calculators, radios, and Hong Kong's latest hit records. What happens is that Chinese fishermen, recognizable here in their blue denim, find some official reason, such as needing spare parts for their boats, to come across to Hong Kong. This allows them to do a bit of business on the side. To find money for what they want, they sell silver coins, antiques, animal furs and much sought-after precious medicines, such as musk. But there's another way of getting musk out of China.
If a Chinese in China, if he has any musk, if he tries to sell to the local medicine factory or something, he wouldn't get that kind of price which he would get in Hong Kong. So usually Hong Kong people who have relatives in China, they go to China quite often. They get hold of all musk they can get. They pay good price over there, bring it back to Hong Kong. And the Chinese factories, the medicine factories, they always eat musk. Since they cannot get it in China, they have to look for Hong Kong.
All this is made easier by China's musk farms. You see, because it's so difficult to breed the animal in captivity, farm workers have to constantly replenish their stocks with deer from the wild. Should a few accidents happen in the process of capturing them, then it's highly likely that the resulting musk pod will find its way to Hong Kong. Here, a smuggler can expect to get 7 times the price he'd get in China. What part does Hong Kong's customs play in all this? After all, Hong Kong is a signatory of the CITES Wildlife Agreement, and they and their Chinese counterparts work in close cooperation. Hong Kong Customs Officer David Tong.
We made a number of cases of smuggling activities between Hong Kong and China. The total value of the goods amounted to quite tremendously, 11 million Hong Kong dollars, or about 1.1 million pounds. However, we did not discover any musk on board. According to our statistics, we made 2 seizures of musk, both by air, which amounted to 2.2 kilograms altogether. And that's all for the past 4 years.
If this small amount represents smuggled musk, what about legitimate musk? Musk coming in from countries like Russia, which doesn't have a total ban on hunting. Is this what Hong Kong officially re-exports to a major end user like Japan? Last year, Japan, according to its own statistics, imported 270 kilograms of musk from Hong Kong, which doesn't exactly square with Hong Kong's statistics of just 3 kilograms exported to Japan.
We need to investigate more to find out really if the musk imported to Japan are actually from Hong Kong.
The traders I've spoken to in Japan say they get their musk from Hong Kong.
For that, I really don't have any comment on that.
To be fair, Hong Kong customs, no doubt, have more important things than musk to worry about. Firearms and heroin, for instance. What's more, their problem is further compounded by the fact that, in spite of the Chinese government's own ban on the export of their musk, Chinese government shops in Hong Kong, of which there are many, are selling musk across the counter, all earning useful foreign currency. Here, for instance, I found a musk pod being offered for 2,000 Hong Kong dollars, about 240 pounds. So whether it's musk from China slipping through the net of that country's rather ambiguous legislation, or musk from Russia coming from the 5,000 deer it culls each year, it's clear that legal musk is a cover and a disguise for the not-so-legal product. This isn't going to change quickly, not as long as this rare creature is seen, especially in Eastern eyes, as the source of those potions to transport us into the perfumed gardens of sensuous delight. Or, less poetically, as a jolly good tonic for the aches and pains of growing old. Certainly, musk will continue to be used in one manner or another. The important thing is to find a way, a somewhat better way than all the dodges and fiddles and circumventions we have at the moment, to ensure the musk deer remains up here in the vastness and the solitude of the mountains, rather than as some stuffed relic in a museum.